And I'm gonna be high.
Good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man, yeah.
I'm a rocket man. And I'm gonna be
Rocket Man.
I'm a rocket man. I wanna go to the moon.
Cam, thanks for joining. Where are you calling in from? Where do you live?
I live in Orange County, California. So we are currently at our office in Tustin.
In what was that? Tustin?
Tustin, yeah.
Well,
It's
not
right next to
Tuscany,
Irvine.
but
Not
they
Tuscany.
probably still have good wine there, I'm guessing.
Yeah, there's more breweries here than wineries, but
Okay, yeah. I have a fun fact for you. I've never been in California ever. I have
That
flown
is
into
shocking to
LAX,
me.
but I didn't leave the airport, and I don't think that counts as like California. It's like an airport
No.
thing. So
Oh man,
Wow.
that's actually shocking to me. I'm shocked you've not been to California. Wow.
we always vacation, and we end up going to Florida or Arizona or to Colorado or Tennessee. We just have never chosen California, and I want to go. I hear it's amazing, but we grew up in my wife and I grew up in rural Minnesota, and we just never went to California. And we're Disney fanatics, and I say I'm really not, but my wife is, which makes me a Disney fanatic. So
Yeah.
we go to Disney World, but I think we're going to end up going to Disneyland, and then I'll be like, hey, I went to California, but I'd like to go for the red wine. I do drink Cabernet from California, so it feels like I'm there.
Yeah,
Same.
you go to Northern California, in that area, you're going to have incredible wines. I mean, a lot of the wines that a lot of people drink in the U.S. are from here. So, yeah.
I am a big wine guy, but my 6-year-old wants to go there to see the trees. He tells me the fun facts
The
he learns
redwoods?
in school about the redwoods and how you can drive a car through them, and he's pretty excited about that. So
It is
There
a
you
beautiful state. We do have that going for us, for sure.
yes, you got that. Maybe not the taxes or really anything else, but it's a
Don't
beautiful
run a
state.
business here. That's for sure. No, it's also just
Okay.
too expensive to live in, but
Yeah, for sure. So take me through a little bit. Cam is the CEO of 3PL Systems. Take me through. You're in an office. It looks like you guys
Yeah.
work remote. You work in an office. How do you run the company?
Sure, absolutely. So the organization before pre-COVID, we had an office up in Long Beach. So all of us were located centralized, one location. And then COVID hit, and it was really an interesting thing that occurred because we told the staff, hey, the government's kind of recommending that all of us work remote for a few days, so on and
Yeah.
so forth. They're like, take your laptops, take your computers, work from home. And then a week later, it keeps going. 2 weeks later, it keeps going. And then we realized that this is not going to end overnight.
Yeah.
And so about halfway through COVID, we actually decided to just get rid of our office. And that doesn't work well with me. I'm really a person that likes to be in an office. I like to separate my house and work from one
Yep.
another. So we ended up getting rid of the office in Long Beach. We allowed our entire staff to work remotely. And then after COVID, we ended up getting an office in Irvine across from UCI,
Okay.
which ended up being, I'm not sure how familiar you are with In-N-Out, but it's a staple of the West Coast. It's a burger joint.
What I hear.
Yeah.
I've been there.
And
I have had In-N-Out, but it was in Texas,
yeah.
I think.
so we ended up getting an office in this place called University Tower. And after we got an office there, we found out it was the headquarters of In-N-Out. They have no branding at all, none around it. And we got the office and we started going up, and we accidentally went up to like the top floor. You see In-N-Out branding everywhere. And it was kind of interesting. But
That's
anyway, we
fun.
landed in Tustin. Michael and I, who's our director of sales, love working in an office. We're actually talking about expanding our office space because some of the new hires that we're getting ready to bring on, we want them in the office with us. And it's
Yeah.
a lot easier for remote workers with engineering because it's good for them. It's quiet for them at home. They're able to do their work, and we can see their outcomes and all that. But anyway, for some of us, we want to be in an office. And you ask, how do you run the company? The way we run this organization is very transparently. And what I mean by that, something I hold like very close to my heart is, well, let's back up a little bit. I used to have a manager that would hide certain things and hide information that I feel like if he was just upfront about it, it would have gone much better with the staff. It would have gone
Right.
much better with the company. And so I've always kind of been against information being held or withheld from staff and not being transparent about it. And so the way I operate and the way it operates from the top to the bottom is just very transparently. And so if it's good news, we share it. If it's bad news, we share it. There's nothing being hidden from our group, but at the end of the day, we're still running by our core values as an organization. There's a ton of trust, ton of integrity. It's just something we really hold close to our hearts. So
yeah, I think most companies do the opposite for fear of, if the leadership makes a mistake, they lose the trust, right? But I think it actually is built the exact opposite way, right? It's built by, I made a mistake, but I recognized it, I fixed it, we all fixed it, let's move on. So I'm glad that you differentiated and said the good and the bad. Whatever the news is, people know. And then I guess maybe there's some strategic decisions made that you don't want the whole company to know, I guess, but I've really never heard a good argument for withholding from managers or anything like that downstream. In fact, most of the horror stories are, if I had known that, I would not have done this. But we've already done this now, and I didn't know. But why didn't I know, right? So, but take me back a little bit. So you're the CEO of 3PL Systems. How long has 3PL been around? I know the name. It's a big TMS in the space, but how long has it been doing the thing?
Yeah, we've been around since 2005. So the reason 3PL was born was from two freight brokers. They owned a freight business. They were looking for technology in this space. They couldn't find something that was user-friendly at the time. So they founded 3PL Systems. They hired a technical developer to actually come in and help them build it. And then from there on out, they started growing the organization. I ended up joining the company 2011. I started while I was still in college, technical support. And then I kind of moved up from there. And that's when I became CTO in 2015. And from 2015 to 2020, I operated as a CTO. And then that's when I stepped in as CEO.
Wait, so back up a little. What position did you start at in 2000?
Technical support.
Technical support to CTO to CEO.
Yeah.
You did the American dream, dude. I think that's what it is. You started a company, you work your way up over a decade. That's awesome.
It was a really interesting ride, and a lot of people ask, like, how did you do that? Like, what was the magic path that you followed in order to get to those titles and to those roles? The reality is that I just operated slightly differently than most people, and I took a lot of risks. Like, there were times where, speaking really transparently, I made a decision knowing that this is most likely going to end my job here, and it's a risky decision, like things that I think were best for the company, and that management most likely is going to disagree with me. And what was interesting about that is it actually did the opposite for me. They're like, this kid is going out on a limb and like doing things that no one else is doing in the org. He's speaking up against decisions we're making. And, he's never ran a company before, but he's catching things that we're not catching, or maybe it's a blind spot for the org. And one of the, speaking just on that point for a second, one of the big things I tell our staff, and something that's, again, really important to me, is if you feel a decision, even from me or someone else that's in leadership, is coming down from the top with an ask or, a direction or something like that, and you disagree with it, you need to speak up. You need to say something, because it might be a blind spot that no one else sees.
Well, I think I've never interviewed anybody that has had that career path going up to CEO like that. And if you think about it, most companies, and I can speak from my experience, I would have wanted to work my way up to CEO at my previous stop, or president, or into the board of directors. I was a sales rep, and I became the top sales rep at that company. And it was a large org, billion-dollar company, or close. And I would have loved working my way up the org, and I would have been loyal, but there wasn't that opportunity. It didn't present itself because my opinion did not matter like yours obviously did. So some kudos to whoever was the owner or CEO or founder at the time, being willing to not only let somebody disagree and hopefully help the company and flourish, but being able to recognize, like, well, Cam's probably going to go do his own thing, or we can have Cam. And that's a really, obviously it paid off well for them. But I do think from my experience, that could have worked out if I maybe would have never started Rocket, because if my opinions mattered and I worked my way up, I would have just grown that company.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. So one of the other things that really contributed to my career path here at 3PL Systems was when I became CTO, and actually even before that, we had a CIO that worked for the organization. He was a prior CIO of Bristol Farms. So I don't know if you are familiar
I know
with
that
Bristol
name, but what
Farms.
is it?
They're like a grocery store line. They're all over.
Yeah.
They had a bunch of them all over the place. He was a mentor to me. And then there was another person who's our current chairman, Sid Kato. He was also a mentor to me. And these individuals, they've worked for very large organizations. They've started companies. They have a ton of experience. And one of the things that I learned early on is you need to shut up and listen, especially to the people that have done it. And you need to understand what they're telling you and what is the lesson they're trying to teach you. And so I did a lot of that. I was quiet in a lot of the meetings. I was listening to the word choices they were making in meetings, listening to how they were executing on certain ideas or paths, speaking up when I disagree, things like that. But I also, at the same time to our CIO, I remember going up to him, realizing the software that we had in place at the time, this software can't scale, and it's old technology, and it's not something that, I'm really proud of kind of supporting. I love our company, but I don't think we're going to do right by the marketplace 5 to 10 years from now if we don't do something about this. And so I pitched the idea, I want to rewrite this platform from the ground up. And what ended up happening...
That was your crazy risk idea, I can imagine.
Well, yeah. So what I ended up doing is in 2015, we had hired an engineer. His name was Elijah. He's still with us today. And him and I actually started the new project without permission. And it was when I was CTO, because we didn't have approval yet. And I know some people are going to be like, well, that's a bad thing. Like, you shouldn't do things like that. It's more like, no, it needed to happen. And our client base would agree with it, that utilized version 1 versus version 2 today. And that risk, ultimately the CEO at the time, he approved it and we moved forward. So all that got worked out and it was a great path. But ultimately what that did for us is it allowed our company to see growth that it's never seen before. So we started in 2015, relaunched the application 2018. And from that day forward, after the relaunch, it allowed us to go after a market that we couldn't go after before. And so...
was that bigger brokers? Was that different type of modes? What was the growth there?
Pretty much all of the above. So it allowed us to secure deals that we wouldn't have seen on version 1, support brokers that were doing above $100 million in freight spend. Whereas before, it would really probably top out around 50 to 70 million in freight spend in version 1. Different modes of transportation. It allowed us to go into Canada and Mexico, whereas version 1 wasn't designed for that. It's a lot of different things that we saw by rebuilding the software. And from 2018 till today, all the improvements the software has seen and all of that, it's just really helped our organization as a whole. But because of that risk I took in 2015, because I executed successfully and delivered a product to the market, and I even had doubters. That's probably the worst part. When you have doubters that say, this kid can't do that. He's never done this before. He's never brought never brought a product to market. And I remember, I'm not going to say names, but I remember these people sharing this with me and even hearing through the grapevine, like, oh, he's going to fail. He's never done this before.
Oh, you got to love that.
And it's like, you know what? That just lit the fire, and now we're going to do it. Not only are we going to do it.
You should be writing them a thank you note now.
Not only are we going to do it, we're going to do it correctly and right by the people that are using us. And it ended up working out, and I got promoted by Sid and the board January 1st, 2020 to CEO. Yeah.
Oh, so I do have to dig into that. I'm going to put a pin in that, but you got promoted to CEO directly before COVID. But I'm going to circle back to that. So you got promoted. You're CEO now. For the context of the audience, whoever's listening to this, what is 3PL Systems in your best, maybe not pitch, but description?
Best description, it's not going to be a pitch. Best description of 3PL Systems, we are a TMS platform that supports over-the-road transportation, such as LTL, TL, drayage, intermodal rail in all of North America. And some of the unique things about us is currency conversion. There's other platforms that do that, but you have to pay quite a pretty penny to have access to those. You don't have to do that with us. But so TMS, we're integrated with over 300 endpoints, meaning with carriers, third parties. And one of our visions and goals has always been make it easier on our customer to have access to all of the technologies in a single interface. And
there it is.
Not only did we do that, we decided to take it beyond that, because with automation and where we're headed as an organization, we wanted to also run on a mobile device. Busy people such as executives that are on vacation or whatever it might be, we wanted to put that control in your hand. And so we actually took our entire TMS and we built it natively into iOS and Android as well, utilizing a platform or code base called Flutter. And so we wrote our platform twice, basically, on the front end, so that it would work natively on mobile devices and on the web. So
for those listening, so Cam was a CTO, he's an actual engineer, and you're a CEO now. Yeah. So you said you wrote it in native iOS rather than what most people would experience in a mobile version would. You can go to the website and it's mobile styled, so you don't have to like scroll forever to find it. But that's not the same as building it in Flutter in native iOS. In fact, it's massively different, and most companies would never build an app because it's expensive and there maybe isn't a reason to. But we do a lot of LTL and home delivery, and all of our customers would love to have an actual app. And that's like a real use case that is not common in the industry for those listening. So you wrote it in Flutter, native in iOS. And then what does that do for 3PL now?
Well, it's native in iOS and Android. So it works on all Android devices and iOS.
So native in iOS and then the other one.
The other one that not many people use in the US. But what does it do for us? Really, it's a differentiator for us. And so the mobile app isn't just a staff portal. It's a customer portal. It's a staff portal. It's a sales portal. It's your carrier's portal. Carriers can log in through the mobile app, and they can upload images, documents, upload statuses of shipments. And it just gives even your sales team that is out on the run, they're going door to door. If they have a iPad, for example, they install our app, they can have this beautiful view of the mobile app running rates in live time at a shipper. Hey, give me some of those details again. Let's take a look at what I can save you on that shipment, for example.
Yeah.
It's a different.
If you're a retailer, like let's say you're a retailer of bricks or tile or something, you got a showroom, and you can just pull it up right there and say, yeah, I can get this to you for this price. That would be a pretty unique case, and most people don't have that.
Yeah,
so,
we've seen it used. Just one more thing I'd add is like people taking cell phone pictures of their freight showing up, damages, whatever it may be, and then uploading those pictures directly to their shipments from their mobile devices. And so it was one of those things that I just envisioned us having one, and it turned out that it was a good call because we have hundreds of users daily that are utilizing the app. So,
yeah, and I think that will continue to, like, even just in my short career, right? The last 8 years, it's gone more from desktop to laptop to I do all my emails on my phone, and I'm traveling, and like the smaller the laptop, the better. So it is, I guess, probably trending that way. Maybe we'll just be using the Apple Vision Pros to book shipment. You'll just have to look at you'd look at Saya or Ward, and it would know which one you're choosing. But so you go into this, you're running a company. What are some of the? I guess I maybe will go back pretty early to this January 1st, 2020. Mm-hmm. I interviewed a couple of founders recently, and I didn't ask them about this, and I regret doing it. What was leading a company during COVID in freight and logistics like?
Oh man, that's a really good question. So when I reflect on that, one of the biggest things that stand out for me is the moment it occurred, it wasn't that big of a deal. All of us viewed it as like, this is just going to be a blip. We're all going to be back at work in a week. Not a big deal. And everything's going to be fine. But when it got serious, meaning, the lockdown was serious. They were locking everything down, especially in California. Like, we couldn't go anywhere in California.
I was in North Dakota. It was a little different for me.
You walk outside, you might get arrested. I'm exaggerating, but it felt that way. But anyway, the fears that were running through me at the time, just taking over as CEO, were very high, and I had to hide that fear because
Well,
I
of
didn't want that
course.
fear to come off to others around me as like, hey, we're at risk of failure. Even though we weren't, it was like, what's going to happen to all these freight brokers? Because our clients,
I was going to
without
say
our
it's
clients,
downstream.
yeah,
Downstream, you were at risk because you
yeah,
guys are a SaaS model, and if no one sends a shipment, then they might hit the minimums for a bit. But if they go out of business, they can't pay you. So
exactly.
that was an existential risk for you downstream.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of fears, a lot of fears going into COVID. It ended up doing the exact opposite ultimately. We
As many in a freight can understand, yes, it did the exact opposite.
and I was like, I didn't even when it did the exact opposite, I couldn't really grasp why. Like I had a hard time grasping everyone's spending more money now. Everyone
So
is
much more.
Yeah, everyone is shipping more. Freight rates are going up. The companies are thriving. Everyone's doing great. And I'm like, maybe we just have to stay in lockdown permanently. Maybe, obviously, I don't want that. It's like,
The government would have run out of money eventually to give us. So.
but it was intense. But after everything kind of settled down and things were going upward, we just put our heads down. We stayed focused and we just kept executing on our promises and what we needed to do for our client base to make them successful. And it worked out for us in the end. Yeah. So these are our biggest growth years, and I think that was true for a lot of people and a lot of companies.
So for Rocket, I wasn't the CEO of Rocket Shipping in the middle of COVID, or when COVID began. I started it in November of 2020. So I started it after the chaos, and it was like Delta. And if you remember the Delta wave, that was like,
Yeah.
it was a 2020 election and the Delta wave. And I had just quit my job where I was making $500,000 a year, and I had a newborn and a toddler.
That's
My
such a
wife was
crazy
super
call,
happy
Gabe.
with me. She's like, great idea. Great. We had just built a house and moved into it. It was a great time to do it. In hindsight, it was the only time to do it because I had to make it work. There was no chance of not making it work. I didn't have an option. But
Yeah.
if you look back, what were some of and I ask all the guests this in some way, shape, or form, what was the hardest either hiring or firing decision that you had to make, either to make, I don't know if you guys had to do layoffs or if you kept everybody and grew, but in your career as CEO or maybe even as CTO, has there ever been a time where you've had to make a really difficult firing or hiring decision?
Yeah. That's happened multiple times and primarily while I was CEO. And one
Turns
is,
out the buck stops with you there.
Yeah. There are two firings that really were difficult for me. And one of the two firings I should have executed on much before, or far previously. But it was, obviously I'm not going to share their names, but
Yeah.
the difficulty is when you hire people you care about or you grow a relationship over 10 years with someone. And you used to be at their same level in the organization. And you work side by side with these people. You're in the battleground with them and you're just doing all these things. And then later on, as the company's growing and as I've entered the role of CEO, you start to realize they were great then. They were great when the company was doing X, but now that we're doing Y, they're no longer a great fit. It's not that they're not a great employee. They're just not great for the organization anymore.
Aaron Rodgers was great for the Packers, but not for the Jets. Same guy.
Yeah.
Different phases.
It's like, on that note, Mark Sanchez, same thing. It's I literally lived next door to Mark Sanchez when he got recruited by the Jets. I mean, was at Mission High School.
USC, and then but to drill down, it's a serious topic, and I always ask this because it pulls back the curtain on a lot of, and I hate to say it this way, but a lot of people are like, oh, CEOs, especially freight tech, and these companies like, oh, they raise money, they don't have to build a real business, and there's a lot of flack on that, but. CEOs on the other side, especially during COVID and now 2023, the worst year probably in freight that anyone had experienced for a long time. There's a lot of tough decisions. And you kind of said it as a different dynamic, which is I've not experienced it, but working on the same level and then being promoted up. And that person now you're like, oh, I have to fire this person or this department isn't working. When you were in it, you thought differently. And now you've seen it from a different angle. So You had to make that decision. You made it too late, you thought, or you should have made it earlier?
On one of them, yeah. So the second one was the moment some stuff occurred, I knew it had to happen. That was still a difficult firing because I was actually friends with the individual outside of the company as well.
Yeah.
So that put a damper on things. But the girl that I'm speaking about that I let go, she was an engineer for us. And it was a very difficult thing to execute on because this is someone I had a lot of respect for, someone that, I cherished as an employee. I worked beside for over, 10 years. And it's to then sit down with her and have the opposite type of conversation of, this isn't working anymore and we have to proceed with, going down this path. That's a very difficult thing to do. And so a lot
one
of
of the
people,
hardest
like
things
said,
to do. And anybody, it's like nobody wants to break up with anybody, especially if they really liked them, but it's just not, they're not in love anymore. It's a similar thing when you fire somebody who you really do care about and have been with for a long time in a certain role.
Yeah.
It's the toughest conversation. And I think at least myself, I can only speak for me, but I always try to find a different way around it. I'm like, well, maybe I could move them to this position, or maybe, and I've got the whiteboard and I'm like, we could go part-time here. And really, if you have to ask yourself, like, if they pass the test of, does this person, if you had everybody at the company was exactly the same skill level as this person, would it raise the average skill level or keep it the same or lower it? And if it's not raise, then you already know your decision, and why would you offer them something else? And that's like, I always have made the mistake of trying to make it easier for me to fire somebody instead of thinking about like, well, even though it's bad that they're getting fired, they can go find a job that they maybe will thrive in. And so we
do something interesting for that to help. We transition people out. So a lot of companies in America are like, I'm going to fire you today. And we've had to do that, but that's for reasons that you have to fire them that day. But we try, if they were a good employee and they're just no longer a good fit for us, we transition them out. We give them time. We have a conversation with them. Sometimes we'll give them packages where you don't have to work anymore, but we're going to pay you for the next 90 days.
Yep.
Your full salary, your full pop. You can leave after today. Focus all your time on finding a new job, but we're going to pay you full time, just like you were here. And one thing we've been very fortunate of, and we're not a company that's taken on any funding. So we are a privately funded, run green company.
I got to dig into that. That's so awesome to hear.
It's a very interesting thing. We've never had to lay off a single person due to like decrease in revenue. That's never happened.
Yeah.
At least while I've been here, since CTO all the way to CEO, it hasn't happened to us. So we've been very blessed in that aspect.
That's awesome. And so you do the 90 days, you do a severance, you do the packages so you can transition them out. I think the only positions you can't do that with is when something happens and it's an immediate for cause fire. Yeah. Or in this industry, and this is a hot topic, or it was 2 years ago, like non-competes, non-solicits. If it's a sales rep and they've got a book of business, you can't be like, hey, I'm going to fire you in like 3 months, but in the next 3 months, port all of the contacts from HubSpot into your own. No, you can't do that.
You can't do that.
So there's certain guidelines. Now, I want to talk about funding. Since I brought up non-competes, how do you view non-compete, non-solicit in this environment? Because you do have competitors, right?
We do have competitors. Okay, that's a multifold question that I'm going to answer. So first off, yes, we do have competitors, but I'm not worried about them recruiting people out of our company. The reason I say that with confidence is I know how a lot of our competitors run their businesses, and to the point where some of their employees have talked to us before. And so I know that our employees are taken care of. They're heard. They feel heard. We pay attention not just to the dollar that they're getting paid. We pay attention to what's driving them. Like, what is important to you outside of just money? Obviously, everyone wants to be taken care of financially, but that's a given. What else really drives that individual? And, some of the stuff that we've done is like educational programs. Like, I'm a big fan
especially with engineering and such, right?
Oh, yeah. So we're big fans of continued education here at 3PL. And so we help fund a lot of that stuff. If you want to learn something new that applies to the technology space, let us know. We'll fund it. And
There you go.
it's going to help the individual. And if they end up leaving and go down a new career path, at least we know we did right by the employee, and that feels good for us, day in and day out. So that's one part of it. But what was the second part that we were going to get out of here?
Well, I think it was about, you hadn't, I don't know, what were we saying?
Funding.
Yeah, well, let's just go, I'll just pivot to that, right?
Yeah.
So you said that you don't have any outside funding. So you're
None.
telling me 3PL Systems isn't on a Series 999
Series 0.
E?
Nothing.
It's not on Series F right now and going IPO. So you have private funding, which means you must be profitable, which has got to be crazy, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So
I'm saying that with as much sarcasm and irony as I can.
No, I know. It's a really interesting thing because I see a lot of people on LinkedIn, and I'm active on LinkedIn, and I pay attention to what's going on in the marketplace. And a lot of people celebrate, like, we raised $100 million, or even in other tech verticals. I'm like, wow, man, you got to pay that
There's
back.
a few that raised $900 million in our space right now.
Yeah, you have to pay that back. And if you're the executives, I do not envy you of those companies because these investors are going to be breathing down your back to pay that back, to make that money for them. And you have to be really confident that you're going to be able to do that because most companies fail, as we all know. And on top of that, if you have to answer to the investor, the moment you're not profitable or you're not showing trends upwards,
Path
they're
to
going to replace you.
profitability as a buzzword there, right?
Yeah, they're going to take your company from underneath you. You're going to be out, and they're going to put executives in place instead of you. And then they're going to take on another series of funding, and they're going to diminish your ownership.
Dilute to death.
It's like it just keeps going from there. And so I'm not. I speak for myself only when I say this. I'm not a proponent of heavy funding. I'm not a proponent of large investments coming on. If they're angel investors or investors you can pay back to get your ownership back through phantom shares or whatever it may be, that makes sense for a lot of companies to get off the ground. But
Yeah.
if you're giving up more than 50% of your company for funding, I don't view that as a good path forward. So
Well, and critics of that argument, which I make all the time, and it's like one of the things I care about most, is you do not have to bootstrap. That's not the only way to do it, but you don't have to take massive amounts of funding. Angel investors, friends and family, take a loan.
Yeah.
What? I mean, banks have SBA loans, and you can get funding if you need money until you're profitable. But the critics of your argument is nothing would ever be innovated if it weren't for VCs in the freight industry. And then my argument to counter that has always been and probably always will be, but the companies that are funded by VC don't innovate for anybody besides that company or besides what they think should be built. Nobody asked for that product. They're building a product that they think the market wants. But not one single customer has never been like, hey, I wish I had this type of TMS. And then it worked, right? You have to have customers give you feedback and then build products that are useful for your revenue.
Yeah.
And then turns out it's a good feedback loop. But there's so much, and it's not just TMS world, although there's plenty of VC funded or PE even. Private equity that's
that
looking
own
to
100%
flip.
of them.
Yeah, I think
certain
so.
ones,
And
some
so
of them, yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of larger competitors to us that they have raised 30, 40, 50 million dollars and then they monetize from the carriers. It's a weird model out there.
Yeah.
But I talked about this with Chris Jolly yesterday when I was recording. And I was talking about if you're building a company to exit, whether it's VC or private equity, because private equity might have a longer time tolerance, maybe 10 years instead of 3. But if it's being built to exit, you can't do the things that you were talking about with hiring and firing. You can't do the things about continuing education plan. You can't do, we'll take care of our people. They won't leave because we're taking care of them, because none of that is in that model. If you're going to sell it in 3 years, you cut every corner you can to get to higher revenue, to get the valuation you need, and you get out. And so I think I would argue it's impossible to serve two masters: an exit, build and sell plan, and a good culture and hiring the right people. I don't think you can pull it off.
I completely agree with that. It's just a different path. And let me tell you, the amount of investors that knock at our door every single week, it's a lot. It's like, here's one of the only TMSs in the industry that has been around forever and 20 years, and is profitable, and they've taken on no funding, so it's not diluted by any of these seed rounds or anything like that. And it's, it looks good on paper for them, but
of course. And going into the next year, they're going to be like, hey, we could give you $100 million and we could grow it over these next 3 years because, people are going to start spending on freight tech again, Cam.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. For what it is, our client base, it means something to me. It's not just into revenue and making money as an organization. The relationships that we are focused on building with our customers are personal relationships. We understand that it's not just like a relationship between me and you, two CEOs. Mm-hmm. It's a relationship that we're responsible for building software to operate this individual's business, and he's taking care of X amount of families underneath his business. So we need to do right, not just by, him and his business. We need to do right by him and all these families that rely on this business. And so we just look at things a little bit differently because it matters. The choices we make as an organization, the impacts that we have on organizations, it matters. And we have to think those things through. And on that same point, something else that we do that's really important to us is we have these things called heads together. And heads together is where we get a lot of our clients on the same call or in the same room. And we have open discussions, the good, the bad, and the ugly, openly with a bunch of our customers. What's not working is the most important question we ask, because we want to know, what are we doing that isn't working for you and your companies? And what do we need to change, or what do we need to build in order to make you more effective and more profitable, and make sure that we're focusing on things that have ROI in mind before we focus on what we call now IT cool, which is build something cool that sounds cool.
The rest of the TMS industry only focuses on.
It sounds cool, but is it going to be practical? Is it going to be used by the company? Like, those things are really important questions to answer when you're building software.
Well, especially when you have it's unique talking to you because, Chris Jolly and I talked about it yesterday. What's success look like, and why would you build it just to exit? And if you're trying to get out quick, then what's your why, right? Well, you've done the same philosophy, but 3PL Systems is a pretty large organization. You've been CEO for 4 years and going on 5, very close to 5.
Yeah.
But you've been around, and that company's been around. It's stable. And you're still doing it that way. That actually is the idea of what entrepreneurs should want to do. Not build and exit, but build and add value. And you can't do heads together, and you can't treat your employees right if you're trying to exit. But you could still sell the company, and that's fine. You could still run it. There's other ways to do business.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
However, if you bring it back to, that's a successful, and if I could shoot towards that, that's where I'll aim at. But how old are you?
I'm 36.
36. I know Cam personally, so I know that you're married and that you have some kids. But what does success look like for you if you're not taking funding and you're not trying to, build this to sell it to Uber Freight? What is success, right?
It's really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting. So as a small part owner of this organization and the current CEO, I don't view money as success. Money is a tool. It is a tool that we can gain access to, and it allows us to do things. Success to me, in my mind, I've already achieved success on the personal side. I have a beautiful family. I have 2 girls, and everyone's healthy, right? So that's success to me personally. But in business, what is success like? Success to me is everyone is being treated equally. Everyone's being treated fairly. Everyone's getting increases based off doing a good job. We're growing as an organization, and we're putting the people first before, all we're thinking about is, hey, how much more money can we make without taking into consideration the people around us that are making it happen. It's not just the dollar at the end of the day for me. Yeah.
Well, I think that, one, I believe you when you say that, and sometimes I don't believe people, right? Not everybody just is authentic, but I believe you when you say that. And also for CEOs of companies maybe I'm thinking of right now that are running an opposite model, I don't actually blame them because they don't even have the ability to think that way. And I think that that's the actual difference in running a company that has predictable, sustainable, repeatable revenue and that can grow the headcount, proportional to revenue. And you try to stay lean and you try to keep the group as small as you can. And everybody probably thinks they're busier than they should be, but that's a stable growth.
Yeah.
And then having to grow it so fast that you can't think of those things. A dollar is the only thing. So it's not that I don't envy CEOs who are in that position or founders who are in that position that started it with VC and now they're trapped. And I've talked to so many of them that are like, I'm trapped until the next series. I need a bridge. I need this. And I hear the pain in their voice. I had the same pain in my voice because it was bootstrapped. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make payroll. I don't know how I'm going to make it through this next 2 months because we lost our biggest client. What are we going to do? I've gone through that, but I was able to at least control the outcome. It was just me and my, and Troy and Michael and others that were helping build it. But at least I knew if there was a way, I was going to figure it out. It wasn't, I had to go ask for somebody else's permission.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. You're only 36 and you've been CEO 4 years. That's a young CEO, especially in freight tech, and you didn't found it. So what's next for Cam? What do you've got your level of success. And I said this yesterday too to somebody. I heard the quote. It was like, hey, you've already accomplished the things that you said were going to make you happy. Where are you at now, right? You got the house, you got the wife, you got the kids. But what do you have for goals for yourself? What does that look like next year?
It's really interesting. Goals for myself. So one of the goals I set out every single year is I have to leave the U.S. on vacation. So if we're talking about just personal achievements, I need to visit a new country every single year. So this year we went to Japan. The year prior we went to Bali and Singapore. The year prior to that we went to Bora Bora. It's like every single year it's we have to do something like that. But
you going to go to Russia or anything next year? Ukraine?
Next year we're talking about Sweden and Switzerland, but we're not talking about Russia. But no,
not a great time.
On the serious note, success for me is just making sure I need to be able to take care of my family and things like that. I do have personal goals that, there's all of us have goals do I want to be driving a certain car? Sure. Do I want to be in a certain type of house? Sure. But those things aren't the main priority. If I'm talking about business side of things, when we talk about the dollars and cents, we've been growing as an org anywhere between 25 and 37% year over year for the last 5 years. And nice. We want to continue that growth pattern. It is important at the end of the day. When I talk about these things, it's not that it isn't important. It's important, but it's not my number one priority in the org. I need to take care of the people, make sure they're happy, and then the money will come with it.
And the best way to take care of the people is to I always liken it to the best way to win a negotiation is to have the most leverage, right? Mm-hmm. Whoever actually at the very end of the negotiation, sometimes that leverage will shift. And whoever has that leverage typically wins a negotiation. I look at that running a business. The only way to take care of all the people at Rocket is for me to have the best leverage. So we have to be profitable and we have to be sustainable and it has to be predictable. And I need to have the ability to say, hey, if we lost our top 3 customers, what does the org look like? If we don't add 5 customers a month and don't hit our KPIs, what does the org look like? So money matters, but it does matter. Yeah. It's a tool for stability and leverage, not a tool like, hey, I do really want a Cybertruck. Although my entire marketing team, there's 3 of them. I call them ACH. That's the first initials of their names. And I was like, it's ACH. And none of it, they're all 22, 23. It went right over their head. I was like, straight cash, ACH. No. I was like, that's how you get paid, a direct deposit. Anyways. But they think the Cybertruck is a bad move. And I value their opinion for some reason because they're young and I want to be cool. I still want the
Michael
Cybertruck.
And I rented one. We rented one. We were at BCS in Texas. We rented a Cybertruck, and that was interesting. It was fun. So,
I mean, I thought I could put a rocket on there, and I'd be Rocket Man, and but come on.
Yeah,
but
don't let that hold you back.
So Cam, we talked about 3PL. I mean, I think that your primary customers would be brokers, right? And truckload and LTL and maybe parcel drayage, ocean. But, if you talk about just looking at the industry, this is a stupid question that people ask all the time, but I do think is actually relevant to 3PL systems. How is AI going to change 3PL systems? What are your thoughts on embracing that or not?
Yeah, sure. So I have a few thoughts on this. So,
Okay.
and I'm going to start outside of 3PL, and I'm going to bring it back to 3PL.
All right.
Companies that are founding their entire worth around just AI, we're an AI driven business, and all you have is an AI tool. I feel like that is a very bad path. And let me explain.
Yeah. Okay.
AI, where we're at, we're in the infancy state of AI. We are just scratching the surface of AI. And a lot of these AI tools being built are just going to be native eventually. Things that just come along with things. And so
Table stakes. Yeah.
exactly, table stakes. And it's not something that you need to like build an entire business around per se, because ultimately GPT is probably going to have a tool that can read all the emails, pull it in, and you can actually utilize it today.
Open source theirs, and it'll be done. And
Well, yeah, Meta already open source Llama, and that's the cool thing about their LLM that they built. You can just download it, and you can utilize it in your own servers, and you don't even have to pay for it. Obviously, I got to pay for the servers, but bringing it back to 3PL, we are embracing AI, and there's some stuff that we're working on right now that is going to be announced in 2025. But we're doing
except for it's
things...
going to be exclusively announced right now on this show.
Can't do that. Might get in trouble. Anyway, yeah, it's we are working on some stuff with AI. It is something that we are embracing as an organization, but we want to have it solve all the practical uses that it can solve. And what I mean by that, for example, if you want to ask the system, rather than you looking for a report, I'm looking for this data and how to generate X. I need to call the support team and ask them how to do this. I want you to be able to talk to the AI. Hey, I need an on-time delivery report on SDs for the last 26 days for this customer. Boom. It outputs the data for you in a beautiful PDF file with the report, so you can actually provide this to your customer. Here's your on-time deliveries with the data driven behind it. And so that's the type of stuff I want to solve. So rather than our clients having to spend a bunch of time on things that aren't going to drive revenue per se, we want the AI models to be able to do that, right? And so that's how we're looking at it as an organization. But we'll never be like 3PLsystems.ai. You will never see that from us because again,
I just started a new company called Rocket.ai. I already raised 10 million. I don't have a product yet, but I did. I am a great salesman, and I put it in the pitch deck. It's great.
Yeah, I'm really excited for what AI is going to become. Again, it's just so new. It's been around for a very long time. It's just finally getting to a point where the market can take advantage of it.
Yeah, the average Gabe Pankinen can go and talk to it. That's the difference, right? Not the people like Cam that could code and talk to it anyway, and use the APIs. I think that part of what I envision AI and freight to do is, one, what C.H. Robinson has done, right? They took a lot of heat for how many layoffs they had, but I've seen some of their numbers now was just public data. Like they're doing thousands of loads quoted and in their system. Yeah. But they're not creating that tool to sell it to somebody else. I think that's why they're winning on that. And I don't know if you watch the All In podcast, but that's one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. David Sachs talks about AI will have the most value for enterprises to like function better, which is, I need to get this report, or, hey, what's the best guideline for onboarding this HR thing? And we got this handbook and all of those things that you need 5 different companies, a data analyst to help you with. That's going to probably be gone.
I agree.
And then it'll be people that can integrate that in their platforms. There's like a competitor to Slack called Glue that has AI in it. And it's like a similar thing. And I'm on the waiting list, but I don't get it because I'm not cool enough. But I think that enterprise level, helping your org function better, and it being like an AI expert of your business rather than a tool like a chatbot with a customer, is probably where it's going to be.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. And Microsoft at Ignite, their Ignite convention was this week. Yeah, they just announced a whole bunch of agents, is what they're calling them, that can help you in your day-to-day. That's part of the Microsoft suite. And so that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. It's built into Excel. It's built into Word. It's built into all of these new tools. And you're going to see people become a lot more efficient with these, AI agents. And I do think it's something that you do need to learn. Like if anyone is questioning, hey, do I need to focus on learning how to use AI? Absolutely.
Me and
100%.
GPT, we go back and forth every day. I have to draw up agreements and contracts all the time for proposals, and I stopped using a lawyer and I just use GPT now. And I had my lawyer review a couple of them. I was like, "Is this good?"
Say, be careful.
I was like, "Hey, is this good enough?" And he's like, "You should add this standard, but I don't need him to make every document anymore." And he's like, "You're gonna replace me?" I'm like, "Yeah, pretty much, dude. But I'll need you for the big stuff." But I do think
You don't want to pay the $600 an hour, Gabe?
yeah, to talk on the phone for 22 minutes, which rounds up to an hour somehow. But I do love most of my lawyers, and that's plural. You can't be in freight and start businesses without plural lawyers. However, part of the reason I ask that, if AI is going to be native to Excel and the agents, right? And a quick sidebar, I just was visiting a customer yesterday for an annual review. And they started in Gmail instead of their help desk thing, but they created all these workflows for Gmail to act as a gate for dispersing the emails to different people. Mm-hmm. But they all have a code, and they just all happen to be 007. And I said, did Gmail do that? Because they're trying to spoof the agents of Microsoft. There's no way that's a coincidence. So it says they're 2 letters 007 for everybody. So they're all secret agents. But where I was going with that, there's the ADD. But where I was going with that was in school, we had to learn how to use Excel. And remember how you used to put that on a resume, proficient in PowerPoint and Excel? That's not that long ago.
How many words you can type a minute? It's I can type 110 words a minute.
Yeah, but how many can you type on your phone? That's a different thing now. Can you use the swipe? So no. Okay, so I normally ask this in a different way, but for you, kind of wrapping up the episode, we could go for hours. But what is? I'll ask you 2 questions. Normally, it's a 1-part question. You can take either one you want, and then I'll follow up with the second. What was the one thing that made your mind up that you're going to chase the CEO position, and when did you know that could happen? And then part B is, what's the biggest mistake you made along the way that if someone else is trying to do that, they could avoid?
Oh, man. Okay. So the CEO role, my goal when I joined the company was not to be at this company originally. My goal, so I'm going to just start there for 2 seconds.
Plans.
I was planning on, I'm going to finish school. I'm going to join one of the big 5, and that's going to be my career path. I'm going to stay within the big 5 for my whole career. And that didn't play out. So what actually happened is I fell in love with freight. And then after I became CTO, that was my original goal, become CTO. That's what I want to do. I want to be a CTO, and I want to stay there. It didn't hit me to wanting to actually become CEO until about 2018, 2017. And that's when Sid started approaching me, and he said, I don't want to be CEO forever of this company. I have other things that I want to do. And I want you to be CEO of the company. I didn't really think of it like that. It wasn't something that was top of mind for me because I was so busy building with the team. And
it was your new version. That was V2. You were almost done with it.
And so that's when it became okay, so what does that look like? And that's when I got introduced to a program called Vistage. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Vistage.
I've heard of
Worldwide.
Vistage. I've had clients say I should join it, and I haven't yet, but you might be convincing me right now just because I want to be like Cam. So
No. So I joined Vistage, and, I listened. Again, mentors is very important. But that's when it hit me, right around 2017, 2018, that I had a direct path to becoming CEO. And then a year before becoming CEO, that's when I found out, as long as I hit these gates, and I execute for the following year, I'm going to become CEO in 2020. And so I knew for about 8 months to a year prior that was going to happen.
What'd your wife think of that? Was she pumped, or was she
I'm shocked my wife stayed with me through all this work. It was 60 to 80 hour weeks sometimes, quite often for when we were rebuilding, definitely. But she was proud of me for sticking to it and actually seeing it through. And she always believed in me and being able to do it. And what's really cool about having a really supportive wife? It's like having just a cheerleader all the time, even during the downtimes when things aren't going as planned. And
and I think
she's
people
very supportive.
undervalue that. I bet if you took a poll of 100 founders, the ones who are successful, 99% of them had a supportive spouse, whether they worked with them or they ran the house or they worked out in the field too. It was just, it's having somebody in your corner that even when things suck and you fail, they're like, hey, you got this.
Yeah.
I had the same experience. My wife, when I told you I started Rocket in 2020, I was like doing really well as a sales rep, making $500,000 a year. And I was 26.
That's
like
a huge
pretty good
risk,
times. Man. And I was in North
I'm
Dakota.
glad you did it, but
$500,000
that's
in
a
North
huge
Dakota.
risk.
It's a big deal in North Dakota to make that much because the cost of living is pretty low.
Yeah.
But she just said, hey, I don't know if she quite understood what risk I was taking. I don't know if I quite understood it either, but she knew it was going to zero. And that we were going to live off of our savings for a while. And it was in the middle of COVID and craziness. So I wouldn't have started it without her, but that's not actually the important part. I wouldn't have been successful in the last 4 years if I wasn't able to go home and be like, all right, I need your help on this, or what do you think of this? Or just, I don't want to talk about work.
Yeah.
So that's why I always ask, it's a common theme. Everybody I've interviewed over the years, and especially for this podcast, their wife or husband is very supportive, whatever role that looks like. But did she, when you became CEO, then let's finish it up with this. What's the biggest mistake you made? Not biggest mistake you made total, but biggest mistake you made that if you gave the advice, somebody else could skip that step. And a couple of people have said, no, you need to make all the mistakes as part of the experience. Is there anything that you're like, well, that one's just boneheaded, don't make that one?
Man, there's a lot. I mean, the most common one, being in an executive role, is hire often and fire faster. Like,
gosh, I hear that a lot too.
Like, it's having the right group around you in a business is just so incredibly important. And, I feel really gifted with some of the people that we have on our staff, and like Michael and Anderson and some of these people. And our engineering team is just impeccable. Like, they're just an incredible team. But there's just certain individuals that I wish I got rid of quicker. That is something
people could
do
take
not
that
ignore, and don't let your feelings get in the way.
That and use it, right? Because I could take that and use it. I continually do the things I shouldn't do, and I learn a little bit more each time, right?
Yeah.
But fire faster is always the best choice. I've never heard a founder or a CEO in any of the groups I'm part of or any of the podcasts I've been on or hosted say they regretted firing somebody too soon. And I was talking with Jonathan Solomon, founder of Transfix, a few weeks back, and he was talking about one-way doors and two-way doors and like how quickly he makes decisions. And then I said something along the extent of like, well, even if it's a huge decision, most entrepreneurs and most people are wired to make a decision quickly, and they already know the answer.
Yeah.
And so I've agonized over it for months before, even though I knew the right answer the whole time. And then always, every single time that's happened, I'm like, man, I should have done that sooner. And sometimes it has a real negative consequence besides just missing a goal or not getting there as quickly. Sometimes you lose other people in the company because they don't have faith. Like, if you can't know that this person shouldn't be here, then what kind of culture do we have? That hasn't happened at Rocket. Knock on wood, Rocket, 4 years, almost going on 5 years now. We have never had anybody quit. And so we're going to try to keep that up. But we have fired people, and we have hired more than we should have, and downsized and all of that. But
we have that in common. Our retention rate is very high as an organization.
Yeah. And I do probably run less profitable than we could because I pay people really well. And I think that that's just a choice I make, and I'm good at sales. I can always bring on more revenue, but I also don't have a series B to make. So I can make those decisions.
No, that's awesome.
Well, Cam, I appreciate you making time for this. I was going to ask, what's the next conference? I always see you guys when I'm at conferences, but you bring like a whole posse, a whole squad. What's the next one you're going to?
The next one that we're going to be at is Manifest. And then after Manifest, we'll be at TIA. After TIA, like, we'll be at a whole bunch next year. But yeah,
I always see your guys' 3PL shirts, and then you're just walking with like 6 people. And I'm like, how do you get the whole squad there? It's so fun. Yeah,
we usually bring about 6 people. We've been bringing more engineers now. It's something that's really important because a lot of companies view engineers as a commodity almost. Like, oh, no, they're just hire them, put them in the back, let them code. And
don't even tell them how the company's doing. Just
it's like, faster. My guy, like, you go read the book, How Google Works. Like, it literally operates based on engineers, and that's why they're so successful.
Yeah.
And it's a very
Not only are they
interesting thing.
paid well, they care about the company too. They're just as important as operations or sales. So
And what's cool is when you bring the engineers to these events is that they get to speak directly to the customers, the potential customers, the vendors, and they get to learn from their point of view directly, who they have impact on, what they're building software for, like how they feel and
that's
what
pretty
they're
sweet.
looking for and what are the issues they're facing. And something that I feel like I would say 98% of companies don't realize is that when an engineer hears that, when they're coding or developing, they're now going to remember that conversation that they had and take those ideas into consideration when they're writing code, or even push back on a task that was written up. Be like, hey, this is great. The write-up's great, but I was at, TIA, Capital Ideas Conference, and I was talking to Ted, and Ted gave me this idea, and I thought it was a really good idea that I think we should take into consideration when implementing this task. And so that's something that's really important to us. And so we're expanding on bringing our engineers to these events as well. So anyway,
I think
I know
that's
that was
awesome.
kind of sidetracked, but
No, I think all this is valuable. The idea for this podcast and to host it is to pick brains of founders in a unique way, because I am a founder and I'm trying to be able to, I like to be able to go back and forth and banter, and I can go pretty deep. I can't code, but I can talk about APIs, and I can talk about native iOS and Flutter and all of those things. And so I think it's useful that I have that knowledge and can go, but my entire goal is to be able to get interesting perspectives out of people like Cam. So if you're listening to this and you're a VP, you could be the CEO of whatever company you're working at. Cam did it. It's not impossible. And I do think people think I either am an employee or I have to start my own company. And Cam is an example that that's not the case. You have to put yourself in the right positions and add value uniquely. We'll just say that. That's all encompassing, whether it's risk taking and building a system in 2015 that you weren't allowed to build just yet. But Cam, I appreciate the time. I'm going to see you at Manifest because Rocket's going to be there. I'm going to try to bring a whole squad, marketing included, and they're going to do like a little vlog. So it's going to be some fun times. But
nice. Looking forward to it.
If you guys want to find out more about Cam, go to 3PL Systems and go to LinkedIn and hit him up. He's on there. He's pretty active. So appreciate the time, man. See ya.
Appreciate you.